Every so often, a once-in-a-generation type talent comes along in the NFL draft that wows teams to the point where they'll purposefully lose every game if it means they get to have him on the roster. In 1998, it was Peyton Manning. In 2012, it was Andrew Luck. In 2021, it was Trevor Lawrence. And now, in 2024, it will be Caleb Williams out of Southern California. His playstyle has drawn comparisons to Patrick Mahomes, and even though he still has a full season of college football left to play, it's universally agreed that Williams will, without a doubt, be the first overall pick in the 2024 NFL Draft. So, who will draft Caleb Williams? What teams could realistically land him next year? And more importantly, where's the best landing spot for him? In today's video, we're going to answer every single one of those questions. We can start the Coming out of Gonzaga College High School in Washington, D.C., Caleb Williams was a highly touted quarterback recruit in the 2021 class. In fact, he was the consensus top quarterback prospect of his class before Quinn Ewers reclassified. With offers from almost all of the top programs in the country, Williams decided to commit to the University of Oklahoma to play for Lincoln Riley. Williams entered his freshman year as the backup to Spencer Rattler, who was a projected Heisman favorite going into the 2021 season. However, Rattler did not live up to those lofty expectations. In the middle of the rivalry game against Texas, down 28-7, Riley decided to put Williams in. In his very first play, he ran 66 yards for a touchdown, and he never looked back. Against all odds, he led Oklahoma to a massive comeback win, and he was installed as a starter for the remainder of the season. Williams finished 2021 with a 64.5% completion rate, 1,912 yards, 21 touchdowns, 4 interceptions, and a QBR of 169.6. The future was bright for the Sooners with Caleb Williams at quarterback. And then Lincoln Riley was hired as the head coach of USC, and chaos ensued, with tons of Oklahoma players entering the transfer portal, top recruits that committed to Oklahoma to play with Riley decommitting, and more. This included Caleb Williams, their rising star quarterback, announcing his decision to enter the transfer portal just to explore his options. Eventually, Williams transferred to USC to continue playing under the man who recruited him in high school, and his 2022 season in LA was phenomenal. Williams completed 66.6% of his passes, throwing for 4,537 yards, 42 touchdowns, 5 interceptions, and a QBR of 167.9. He also ran for 382 yards and added 10 rushing touchdowns. Unsurprisingly, he was named AP's College Football Player of the Year and won the Heisman Trophy. Going into 2023, Williams is entering what many expect to be his final season in college. He's already being touted as a generational quarterback prospect, finding himself on the top of nearly every big board and mock draft. There's no doubt he will be the number 1 pick in the 2024 NFL Draft. The only question is, who will draft him? Let's start by eliminating all the teams that don't need to draft a quarterback. Quick disclaimer, this is all just my opinion. One of these teams could have a catastrophic collapse in 2023 and end up with the first overall pick and a reason to want to draft Williams. But I'm pretty sure none of these teams will need to pick him. We'll do this in phases. For phase 1, let's eliminate all the teams that don't need a quarterback because they already have one of the best in the league. This eliminates 7 teams: the Kansas City Chiefs, the Philadelphia Eagles, the Cincinnati Bengals, the Buffalo Bills, the Los Angeles Chargers, the Baltimore Ravens, and the Jacksonville Jaguars. For phase 2, let's eliminate all the teams that don't need a quarterback because they just recently drafted one. Unless any of these guys puts up an awful 2023 season, none of these 5 teams will be drafting Williams. The Carolina Panthers, the Houston Texans, the Indianapolis Colts, the Pittsburgh Steelers, and the Chicago Bears. For phase 3, we'll eliminate all the teams that have a quarterback with a massive contract. It doesn't necessarily mean that they're good, but none of these 4 teams will want to draft a quarterback because of that. The Cleveland Browns, the Seattle Seahawks, the New Orleans Saints, and the New York Giants. Okay, so quick side note. The Denver Broncos technically qualify for this, but there's also been some rumors that if Russell Wilson has another really bad year, they might get rid of him or want to get rid of him or do something about his contract. he's got a massively bloated contract. He's owed like $200 million. So it would be hard, but they might move on. Maybe. I don't know. We'll see. For Phase 4, we'll eliminate all the teams that don't have one of the best, but are pretty happy with who they've got, or their situation around them. This includes the Dallas Cowboys, the Miami Dolphins, and the San Francisco 49ers. And for Phase 5, we'll eliminate teams that won't be bad enough to be able to get the first overall pick. They might need a quarterback, but they likely won't be able to get Caleb Williams. Of course, if the Rams and the Broncos of last year taught us anything, it's that we never know who's going to truly suck in a given year. But these teams probably won't be getting the first overall pick unless they trade up for it. The New York Jets, the Minnesota Vikings, and the Detroit Lions. This leaves us with 9 teams that don't meet any of these criteria. None of these teams have true stability at the quarterback position, and almost all of them have the potential to either have a truly awful 2023 season or poor quarterback play to the point where the front office will decide it's time to move on. Let's go through these 9 teams in order from least likely to most likely to land Williams, and what the teams would look like if they had him on their roster. Williams into the end zone. Touchdown, Oklahoma. If the Titans end up with the first overall pick and select Caleb Williams, they should be given an NCAA-style death penalty for gross negligence of their quarterback prospects. If they were to do that, it would mark 3 consecutive years that they drafted a quarterback intended to replace Ryan Tannehill. Even worse, the 2 guys they drafted were seen as project quarterbacks that needed time to develop. Moving on from a player like that after 1 year is pretty bad, but doing it twice, 2 years in a row, someone's gotta be punished for that. Besides, the Titans have more pressing issues, like, I don't know, the single worst receiver room in the NFL. It's Treylon Burks and then everyone else. The only other name I even recognize on the depth chart is Kyrus Jackson, and he's a 4th string wideout. Give Will Levis a chance, and please get him some help. New England is in a bit of a weird state as a franchise. This year is make or break for Mac Jones, their 2021 first-round quarterback that so far is yet to live up to those expectations. But the team around Jones isn't bad enough to where they could realistically end up with the first overall pick. If the team decides they want to move on from Jones and really wants to make a swing, they could trade up for the pick, but the likelihood is that the team that ends up with the pick won't want to trade it to anyone. It would make sense for New England to try to make a splash like this, considering the team around the quarterback position isn't bad, and adding Caleb Williams would probably make them Super Bowl contenders. But while anything can happen, I just don't think the Patriots are a realistic landing spot for Caleb Williams. It's not normal to see a team win a Super Bowl and then immediately enter rebuild mode, but that's exactly what the Rams did. A year after going all in and winning Super Bowl 56, LA finished with a lowly 5-12 record, though they played most of the year without quarterback Matthew Stafford and wide receiver Cooper Kupp, arguably their 2 best players. But Stafford is 35, and it's unsure how much longer he's going to be around. The Rams could absolutely play bad enough to end up with the first overall pick, and they actually have their first round pick this year. But the real question is if they'll want to eat a large chunk of Stafford's salary to either release him or trade him elsewhere. They could still draft Caleb Williams and let him sit behind Stafford until his contract runs out, but Williams is the kind of prospect that should start day 1, so it wouldn't be a wise decision. It's possible, but Stafford's cap hit is just too big for me to see this happening. For the Packers to not only end up with the first pick, but to also want to draft Caleb Williams, Jordan Love would have to be really awful. They did just extend him for a year, which is a sign they're preparing for the best and worst case scenarios, but this is another situation where I just don't think the Packers are going to suck so much that they get the first pick. I mean, I think Jordan Love is a fine quarterback, and while I don't think he's going to be Aaron Rodgers, he's good enough to carry the torch for Green Bay. Those are just my thoughts, though. There's no telling what's going to happen next year. If he's that bad, Caleb Williams would slot pretty well into a very young Packers team, and there's a great coaching staff in Green Bay to help him adjust to the NFL level. But it's just basically impossible to see Jordan Love imploding that bad with this team. Here's the first team that I can actually imagine landing Caleb Williams. In my opinion, I don't think Desmond Ridder is the face of the franchise. and the Falcons are still in the middle of a long rebuilding process. If they get the first pick and use it on Williams, they'll probably become the most fun team to watch in the league. The young talents of Williams, Bijan Robinson, Drake London, and Kyle Pitts would make for an exciting Falcon squad that could surprise some people and become contenders. The only question is if they'll actually land the first overall pick. There are going to be some bad teams next year, and while the Falcons are probably going to be one of them, they just may not be awful enough to secure the prize of Williams. Now that Tom Brady is gone for good, the Buccaneers are going to be looking for a new franchise quarterback, and it seems like they're going to land one of the top prospects in 2024, as they're set for a position battle between Baker Mayfield and Kyle Trask next year. Tampa Bay has a shot to land Williams next year, but the team isn't the worst in the league. The receiver core is top-notch, and they have a rising star running back in Rachaad White. It'll take some seriously awful quarterback play next year to get that pick. And while Baker Mayfield, who a lot of people think is going to be the starter, isn't good by any standards, he's good enough to win a decent amount of games, something the Buccaneers cannot do if they want Caleb Williams. The moves that the Commanders have made in the past few months have indicated that they're preparing to tank for the number 1 overall pick in the draft. And good on them, because there is no better fit for Caleb Williams than the city of Washington, D.C. He played his high school ball at Gonzaga College High School, a school right smack dab in the middle of downtown. Washington has even begun building up draft capital to make a run at the first pick, but it seems in this scenario that the team that ends up with the first overall pick won't trade it. The Commanders will have to lose a lot of football games in order to get that pick, and they could do it. But it's not a sure thing because there is one team left to talk about. The only thing that can do worse than a blatant tank is a team that just really, really sucks. And that team is the Arizona Cardinals. They'll be without starting quarterback Kyler Murray for a significant portion of the season, so it'll be Colt McCoy until he's ready. The offense has some serious questions without Kyler leading the way, and the defense was below average in 2022. Currently, the Cardinals have the furthest odds to win the Super Bowl in 2023, tied with the Houston Texans at plus 20,000. They're not going to compete for any sort of title or playoff berth in the 2023 season. And neither are the Houston Texans, who traded their 2024 first-round pick to the Arizona Cardinals to move up to select Will Anderson Jr. in the 2023 draft. The Texans and the Cardinals both have an abundance of holes on the roster, and they're expected to be the worst and second worst teams in the draft. The Cardinals own both of those picks, and they're expected to use them on Caleb Williams and maybe generational receiver Marvin Harrison Jr. If it's not Arizona, it'll be a miracle. But there is one question. What do the Cardinals do with Kyler Murray? He's a good quarterback, so if they decide they want Caleb Williams, do they trade him? Do they release him? That's the only question for this team if they draft Williams. Other than that, it's a slam dunk option for Arizona. So, where does he go? Let's make one thing clear. It's going to be very difficult to ruin a prospect like Caleb Williams. He's the kind of guy to be the only good player on a team in shambles. The only team I'm seriously concerned will kill his confidence is the Las Vegas Raiders. Josh McDaniels has proven to not be the answer, and they did such a good job of killing Derek Carr, they had to release him as a scapegoat. If Williams gets drafted there, it could be a problem. Any other team, though, good enough to develop him or not bad enough to kill him completely. But the team that would be most exciting to see him on is by far the Atlanta Falcons. They have some freakishly good young players, and adding Caleb Williams will make them very interesting and a very athletic squad that, don't kill me for saying this, could compete for a playoff spot or maybe a Super Bowl berth. Who knows? But just because I want Caleb Williams to go to the Falcons doesn't mean I think he will. I don't think that's much of a debate. Unless something bizarre happens between now and next April, and keep in mind, a lot of things can happen in a year, he will be an Arizona Cardinal. That team not only has their own pick, but also the pick of quite possibly one of the worst teams in the league. If one of those picks isn't number 1, I'll be shocked. But crazier things have happened. Just because Caleb Williams is a generational talent doesn't mean there aren't any other good quarterbacks in that 2024 class. This is quite possibly the most loaded QB class in ages. Right behind Williams is what some consider another generational prospect, North Carolina's Drake May. May is more of a pure pocket passer than Williams, and he's got the measurable that NFL teams love. He's going to go off the board very quickly. Besides May, there are some other quarterbacks in this class that could go in the first round. Michael Penix, Quinn Ewers, Bo Nix, Jordan Travis, Joe Milton, and J.J. McCarthy are all great college quarterbacks that could play their way into a first-round consideration at next year's draft. If any NFL teams even remotely need a quarterback or might in the future, this is the year to get one. Personally, I believe we'll see 4 or 5 quarterbacks going off the board in the first round. If we go off the current consensus draft order, which most certainly won't be what it actually is come April, Williams will get drafted to Arizona at 1. Drake May will probably go to Tampa Bay at 3, and I imagine Washington will pick a quarterback at 6. I think that quarterback will be Michael Penix, but Quinn Ewers could play his way into this selection as well. And whichever one of those guys doesn't go to Washington, I imagine he'll go to Minnesota at 16. Of course, all of this is speculation, and we are way out from the 2024 NFL Draft. But the way things stand right now, this is how I see it playing out. Of course, there is still an entire season of college and professional football to be played before any of this can take place. It is entirely possible that Drake May overtakes Williams, or some NFL team has such a catastrophically bad season that they feel the need to draft a quarterback at number 1. But history has shown time and time again that the top prospect a year out will usually end up being either the top prospect or very close to the top prospect come draft time. Caleb Williams should be a lock to go number 1 overall next April, and so far it appears that the Arizona Cardinals are going to be the team to get him. We'll eventually know what happens, but for now, let's just enjoy watching him and his time at USC.
So cool to see Dye ever present for his teammates.
Williams keeps the ball.